Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked, locked, here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. And we broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. Nathan is engineering the broadcast at GCN in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli, and there's a list to your there's a link to your instructors on the website, usaprepares.com. And, for those of you who are new to the class, there are well over 200 of us here at USA Prepares. Experts in various areas. All of us are innovators. We're dentists and medical doctors, engineers, surgeons, CEOs, editors, researchers, broadcasters, physicists, farmers, inventors, and all of us are students rising to become, all of us are students. Some of us are instructors, and some of us are students rising to become instructors. Many of us, I would say all of us, could not hold down a job because we don't take direction very well. And today, I'm delighted to introduce to you Truck Driver Jay. Now, Truck Driver Jay has called into this broadcast many times over the months, and he's had some thoughts and opinions, and he's voiced them on the air. And I liked him so well that I invited him to become an instructor. And you can do the same thing. If you'd like to be an instructor, and you call in and you've got something important to say, something that's accurate, cogent, you can call us, and we'll even pay for the call. And that number is 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. And if you call and we hear from you and we like what you have to say, then you may be invited to be an instructor. And what would happen is I would ask our engineer, today is Nathan, to get your name and telephone number, and I'll call you after the broadcast. Then we'll talk about what you have to say and how you could be a instructor at USA Prepares. That's how it works. That's how it works. Truck Driver Jay, welcome.
Good morning, Vince. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Truck Driver Jay, I introduced who you are. Now, you have a commercial driver's license. You have passed the requirements that it takes to be behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. And you are a professional, and you're a professional. What I'm saying is you just don't hop behind the wheel of a large truck like that and just take it for a ride. I mean, some people may, but to be a professional, you go through training and classroom activities, plus behind the wheel, plus you learn about the mechanics. And Truck Driver Jay is a professional truck driver. Jay, how many miles a year would you say that you spend behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler?
I would say about 200,000 miles a year.
Okay. 200,000 miles a year. Now, you have some restrictions, right? You just can't drive until you're exhausted and then, take a few-hour nap and then get behind the wheel and drive till you're exhausted again. Don't you have regulations that you have to follow?
Yes, I do, and the restrictions are getting more and more and more every year. First, let me start by giving my why. Why am I a truck driver? Why did I choose truck driving? I started out, I've known that this is what I want to do all my life. I grew up playing with a big rig toy, and I've learned about truck driving all my life, just little bits here and there. and I was living in North Carolina, and I lost the job that I had, and I lost the place where I was supposed to live, and or the place where I was living, and I started traveling, and I had a truck driver friend, and he said, "Well, why don't you come over the road with me, for a little bit?" And he kind of showed me some of the ins and the outs of truck driving, and we went to a lot of places, and I really got a real good feel for it, and when you do something and you really feel comfortable for it and you have a passion for it, that is what you're supposed to be doing all your life. I don't know whether you feel that, about that with farming, but, or ranching, but there's just some things that come very naturally to a person. Some people, they're very good at doing hair. That is just what they love doing. There's some people, they have this passion for taking care of people after they've passed on. They become morticians and stuff. They have that ability. There's some people that are meant to be heart surgeons, and I'm very happy to say I'm meant to be a truck driver. I can back this 53-foot trailer up to a dock in between two other trailers in very tight situations and not hit the other trailers. Now, I was living in Wyoming, and the state of Wyoming paid for me to go through truck driving school, and I had a friend, or I have a friend, who works for the same company I do. We both worked for a previous company, and that company went belly up after I was only with them for 6 months, and I found another company to go to, and I said, "Hey, listen," I told my friend who trained me, because truck driving school only teaches you the basics. They teach you how to back up. That's all they do. They teach you how to back up. They teach you how to shift. And shifting an 18-wheeler is not like shifting your car. In your car, you can either have a 4-speed or a 5-speed manual. I got 13 speeds. And those 13 speeds come in very handy when I am hauling 42,000 pounds of cargo. My school was only 2 weeks long. The school cost the state $4,700, and there are other schools out there go up to $6,000 or even $7,000, and they go into a longer period of time, give you more seat time behind the wheel, practicing shifting, practicing backing up. My wife also went through the same school. The school had a grant for her, but she just couldn't get the knack of backing up in the amount of time allotted, but she rides along with me. To get a CDL, you have to pass the test. There are some schools that are better than others and give you more experience, and that's the name of the game with truck driving. You've got to have experience, and you got to really know what you're doing. There's a lot of etiquette in truck driving. When you are traveling down the road, letting one person merge in for example, one thing that really makes other truck drivers really bad is, now I can do 70 miles an hour. There are a lot of trucks that I can only do 62, 63, maybe 65 miles an hour. There are some that are a lot faster than I am. They can do 80. If you're doing 80 miles an hour, I am in the right-hand lane, and you're coming up to pass me. If I'm not paying attention and I pull out in front of you, you have to step on your brakes. And a big truck cannot slow down as fast as a car because we weigh a whole lot more. So that will upset a truck driver, if you pull out in front of them, and because then they got to get back up to speed after they pass you up, and it's just frustrating. But there is a lot of training involved, and some people just cannot get the hang of shifting the gears because you have you have low gears, then you have high gears. I have 4 low gears, and I have 8 high gears, if that makes any sense.
Well, sure it does. You have 2 ranges. You have a low range and a high range, right?
Right. I have gears 1 through 4 in my low, and I flip a switch to the high, and where I go up to 1, that is now 5, and I have 5 low and 5 high, 6 low, 6 high, 7 low, 7 high, 8 low, 8 high, and I also have reverse, and reverse is just one speed, and I'll get back to you after the break.
Yeah. Truck driver Jay's with us, and he's explaining what it's like to be behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. He's a professional. And, class, I got to tell you, I've been behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler. You got to pay attention all the time. There's no room for any distraction. We'll be right back. Talking about 18-wheelers. Truck driver Jay's with us. He's a USA Preparedness instructor. And, Jay, just to add a little exclamation point to this, how difficult it is to do all the things that you do behind the wheel of a truck driver, right? If you have a car that has a stick shift, 4-speed, 5-speed, whatever it may be, the gasoline engine may idle at around 700 RPM, and red line or maximum RPM may be between 5 and 6,000, typically, RPM. Well, I was driving a fire truck, much younger, and back in the 70s, and idle was on this fire truck. It was a big diesel engine, inline diesel engine, and idle was 600 RPM, about close to what a gas engine of today would be. And maximum RPM was 1,100. So there was only 500 RPM difference between, idle RPM and maximum RPM. So you're shifting a lot because you only have 500 RPM between minimum and maximum RPM, if you will. And so what is it like in today's big diesels? They're a lot more powerful, I'm sure, than the... I drove a large fire truck. But what is the difference today? What's minimum and what's maximum RPM?
I have a 2014 Freightliner Cascadia. That is a company truck. I'm just a company driver. I'm not an owner-operator. My truck idles about the same, about 600 RPM. And it maximum that you want to do is 2,000 RPM. So you get a little bit more leeway. At 70 miles an hour, I'm right about 1,400 RPM in 13th gear.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So the point is, class, there's a lot of shifting going on. And you may see a tractor-trailer driver leave a stoplight and drive 15 feet in first gear and then shift into the next gear. Am I right?
Normally, unless I'm starting up on a hill, I'll start out in second gear or maybe in third if I'm empty. If I'm full, if I have a full 42,000 pounds of weight in the back of the trailer and I pull a reefer, My reefer, it can manage temperatures from 80 degrees all the way down to minus 15 or minus 10. But that's as cold as you want to go, because otherwise it's just too much work on the compressor. But the shifting the gears, it's not the getting forward. Going forward is the problem. It's the slowing down. That's the big problem. I take a long time to slow down, and if I'm coming up on traffic, I'm going to start slowing down a quarter mile before the traffic, where they have stopped, because just be safe. And if I try to hit my brakes too hard, they will explode, literally. They will heat up very hot, and the brake can just break. It will explode.
Jay, let's talk about that for a second. That's one of the greatest concerns I have when I'm parallel, side by side with an 18-wheeler, whether he's passing me, whether we're just going the same speed, or whether I'm passing him. And
right.
I've read that, and these brake drums that you're talking about are huge, and they're spinning at a pretty significant RPM. And they can develop cracks because they can overheat if you really have to stop quickly. They can get almost red hot, if not red hot. And you've smelled the brakes of trucks going downhill, class. And what is that smell? Well, it's the brake linings and getting really, really hot. And, of course, the brake drum, the metal drum that the brake linings press against and cause friction to slow the vehicle down, it all gets really hot. And if they fracture, they can literally come apart by centrifugal force, exactly what he's talking about. And this would be like a hand grenade. It would be like a hand grenade with big chunks of steel flying out in all directions, vertically and out to the side. And literally, it could pierce a windshield with no trouble whatsoever. We'll be right back. Truck driver Jay's with us, and we're talking about the 18-wheelers. And I mentioned after Jay commented about the brakes can explode, I mentioned exactly how that would happen. Jay, was that accurate, what I said?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And I've personally witnessed tires or brakes catching fire because the driver was fully loaded going down a hill, going down a steep hill. Some of the, if you're in Missouri, going down Interstate 44, you see, the incline, it says 6% or 5%. That's a good grade for a downhill. And if you're not careful with your brakes, they can overheat. They will start smoking, and the drums will turn red, and they can catch fire. And if they catch fire, there's a good chance that if you're still on your brakes, they could explode at that point.
Okay, and what about? Let's talk about the weigh stations. What are they looking for? You see these weigh stations for trucks, and it says, trucks must pull over. And so some trucks pull over and some don't. Some have these automated or communication systems, and they don't pull over, like Walmart, right? But other trucks have to pull over. What's that all about? What are they looking for?
Okay, for a regular truck, like me, or a dry van, your maximum amount of weight, and that includes the truck, the trailer, your fuel, everything in the truck. I have my wife with me. We have all of our clothes. We have all of our stuff. And the load that's in the trailer, maximum amount of weight is 80,000 pounds. you cannot be over 80,000 pounds. And with 42,000 pounds of cargo in the trailer, full fuel tanks in the truck, I also have a liquid called DEF, or diesel exhaust fluid, which minimizes the black smoke. It eliminates the black smoke in my truck. I don't have black smoke coming out. And I also have a 30-gallon tank for the reefer, for the refrigeration unit. So all of that weight altogether cannot be any more than 30. It can be no more than 80,000 pounds. I can have a maximum of 12,000 pounds on my steers. I can have a maximum of 34,000 pounds on my drives, and a maximum of 34,000 pounds on the trailer axles. All that added together is 80,000 pounds. Now, there is exceptions to the rule. There is heavy loads, oversize, overweight, over length, and those have special permits. And there was a recent story of a tractor trailer carrying 300,000 pound generator out of Vermont going to Connecticut, and it was detained on the side of the road for about a week before the permits and the route got finalized on where it could go. But the weigh stations, first they want to see, are you on proper weight? Do you have your weight distributed properly? If the weight is not distributed properly, can you adjust the weight using your trailer axles? My trailer axles move forward and backwards. Many times you go down the road, some of the trailer wheels, you'll see them all the way forward, as far as they'll go, and sometimes you'll see them all the way to the back. If you are going to California, you can only be just a certain amount far back. They have a special F. It starts with F, but FMLA, or not FMLA. It's high school agriculture.
What I've seen, Jay, is I've seen these adjustable pins that will let you move the rear axle, forward, center, or back from a specific position. Is that what you're talking about?
Right. And each hole on my trailer is 500 pounds. So if I want to move more weight to the front of the trailer, let's say I have a whole lot of lettuce in the front of my trailer, and then I pick up a whole bunch of onions that go on the back of the trailer. Well, the onions are going to weigh a lot more than the lettuce will. So I need to move my tandems. That's my trailer wheels. They're called tandems. I can move my tandems to the back to put more weight on the nose of the trailer rather than on the trailer wheel. It helps me distribute the weight better.
Jay, let me ask you this. So if you pull into one of those weigh stations, it's up to you to figure out how to set that trailer, right? I mean, that's your responsibility. And if anyone's going to get fined, ticketed, or whatever it may be, it's on you, isn't it?
Well, with the company that I work for, they will get fined. It doesn't come out of my pocket. It comes out of the company's pocket, but I will get in trouble for it. And that's not a good thing.
Sure. I guess ultimately you get fired, right? If you keep it up.
Right.
Okay. What about DUI? What would happen if and you don't see this very often. I mean, I've never seen a truck driver at a truck stop, eating dinner saying, "I'll have a few beers before I leave for the road. You don't see that, do you?
No. Matter of fact, you hardly ever hear of. Now, there was a story last year. A truck driver. He was from Canada, and he went from Seattle, Washington, to Boston, Massachusetts, 3,000 miles, nonstop. He stopped for fuel, and that was it. He did not stop to get any rest, and the only reason he got caught, and he was high on crack cocaine and methamphetamines to keep himself awake. And the only reason he got caught was he locked himself out of his truck, and he was raising a commotion over it. But most generally, you do not hear about truck drivers getting a DUI or on drugs because of the fact, one, there's random drug tests that we have to go through, and the way stations will pull you in just to look at your eyes, just to see, if you are alert, see if you are responsive. They want to see your paperwork also. They check your logbook. Everything that I do as a truck driver that pertains to the truck, I have to log it. I have a logbook. I have 14 hours in which to get everything done in the day. 11 of those hours maximum is what I can drive. Now, I have to take 15 minutes first thing in the morning or, before I leave and do a pre-trip inspection. I check the wheels, I check the tires, I check the brakes, I check my windows and mirrors, I check the airlines, I check my lights, I check the oil pressure or the oil level, I check the radiator fluid, make sure that, I have enough level on that. And then I am still on paper logs, and in those paper logs, I can legally show 15 minutes for loading, 15 minutes for unloading, but in December, all that will change because everybody, unless you have a 1999 truck or older, you will be on an electronic logging device. And what that means is from the time that you start your engine and you start moving, your 14-hour clock starts and it does not stop. And if you run out of your 14 before you run out of your 11, you're done for the day. So you're going to have a lot of drivers now that can take a short break, get some rest, and then get going again. They're not going to be able to do that. And there is a company called Werner, and they are spearheading this drive for everybody to be on electronic logging device. And those of us that are still on paper logs, we see it as a form of control, and it is it's intrusive and restrictive.
No question about it. Now the question is Warner interested in becoming a bigger monopoly because they can afford all this electronics that puts a burden on the independents? Just a thought. We'll be right back with Truck Driver Jay. Behind the wheel with Truck Driver Jay. So, Jay, I've seen police pull over 18-wheelers. I've seen them pull lots of them over the years. But what I have not seen, I've never seen a Walmart truck, a Werner truck, a Sam's Club truck, or a Snyder truck pulled over by the police. Why?
It's probably because they're going too slow. Werner, Swift, JB Hunt,
Yep.
Prime, especially Prime. They have slow trucks. They can't do over 65. Swift, I think they're at 63. It's more of the smaller companies that are allowed to go 68, 70, or even 75. And if you are a owner operator, you can open up your truck and states like Wyoming, Montana, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, they have 80-mile-an-hour speed limits, or Texas. They have 80-mile-an-hour speed limits. Well, the trucks can go 80 miles an hour, and they can do it very well because it's just straight, open roads. But the big mega carriers, are what we call them, they're limited, and most of them are training companies, like Swift. So you have a trainee behind the wheel. You don't want them going really fast. So
that makes a lot of sense. Let me ask you about this. Let me ask you about fuel consumption. What kind of miles per gallon do these trucks get, empty versus full, in terms of a load?
That's a very good question. My truck, like I said, I have a 2014 Freightliner Cascadia, empty or a light load, I can get 7.775 miles per gallon. And that is really good. There are some of them that will get 10 miles per gallon. Now, you may say, that's not a whole lot of miles. Well, you got to think. I'm hauling 40,000 pounds of weight. I got 20 tons or 21 tons in the back of the trailer. And I got to move that, 2,000 to 3,000 miles, depending on where I'm picking up and where I'm delivering. Now, the older trucks, you're looking at 5, maybe 6 miles per gallon. A tractor trailer can hold anywhere between 100 gallons on both sides, the big tanks on the side, to 400, I'm going to say 400 to 500 gallons, that'd be like 250 gallons on each side of the tank, on each side of the truck. So we can go a very long distance without stopping. Your car...
How about this? Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you about aerodynamics. So if you're getting 7.75 miles per gallon, if you bump that up 10%, that's just 3/4 of 1 mile per gallon. But that's pretty significant. What about all these aerodynamics that you see on these big trucks? You see them over the cab. You see them along the edges of the trailers. Do they work?
Yes, they do. They make a huge difference. And I'll talk about that right after we come back from the break.
Well, actually, we're done with this hour, Jay. So here's what we'll have to do. We'll have to have you back again and again because it's fascinating. Fascinating to get the view from... we need to get more of your view from behind the steering wheel of an 18-wheeler. Jay, thanks so much for being part of USA Prepares, and this was your very first full hour with us. I've been delighted to be with you side by side. Thank you very much. I'll call you in the next couple of days, and we'll get you back on.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Hour number 2, Dr. Joel Wallach.
Hello, everybody. This is Gwyneth Isaacs here, filling in for Vincent Finelli. He's otherwise occupied this week. I'll be with you all week. I have Rick Shealy with us. and we were busy discussing, exactly how things are playing out with the when the fascists begin to gain control of a governmental system and exactly how they do it. Now, one thing they mentioned in the news, Rick, I'd like to get your comment on this. I heard on the news just then, apparently, that a bunch of Antifa people, if you can call them people, they went to Virginia and they went to a public park in Charlottesville, Virginia, and they pulled down tried to pull down a statue of General Lee in a public park. Did I hear that right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There was a riot. What were these people thinking? What did they think was going to happen? Did they leave their brains in the glass vat by the bed in the morning? You don't go to the South and go pulling down statues of General Lee. I'm very sorry for laughing, but these people have an IQ of about 80. I don't even live in America, and I know, I've heard of General Lee. I know that the Southerners love him. I know that he stood against Lincoln. And one thing that my dad said when I was a little girl, he was very politically educated. He was just educated full stop. He could speak about 5 or 6 languages, including Russian, by the way. He'd studied political theory his whole life, capitalism, and he'd studied, communist political theory, and he'd studied about World War II and World War I, and he knew about the Crimean War and the Boer War and the American Civil War and the American War. There's very little that my dad did not know. And he said, everybody idolizes Lincoln, President Lincoln. Everybody says what a great man that he was. But what they fail to say is how Lincoln actually did a whole lot of backroom fascist deals I think it was the California Railway at the time when he was president, bought up a whole lot of land at peppercorn prices, and then afterwards, to cut a very long story short, made a fortune on building this railway. And basically, a lot of people actually died making this railway line. And I think there was not a documentary, there was a film made about the construction of this railway, Hell on Wheels. I don't know if you've seen that or not. I've seen bits and pieces of it. But apparently it was really brutal. And that was Lincoln actually did that. And it was pure fascism, absolutely pure fascism. And, slavery was becoming unfashionable in the South anyway in Lincoln's day, and it probably would have gone out the window within just a few years. Would you like to comment on that?
Well, you bet. There's a lot of things I can comment on. You mentioned quite a few things there, Glenn, but, talking about the mainstream media and their obligation to the elites to sway public opinion and hold on to the narratives, the memes, the themes, the talking points, the microphone. Basically, they want to cultivate followers and not thinkers. And you mentioned Antifa. It's really funny because I've mentioned something similar on the air many times. One of their favorite chants from Antifa and Black Lives Matter is something similar to Trump, KKK, no fascist USA. And they chant it's really it's sad and funny, absolutely. Now, let me just break down that chant. Let me just break this down to show you how every group is being used And that's why I say the term group identity politics. And that's why I mentioned earlier in the show about the template, the blueprint, the playbook, the flow chart for the destruction by the elites. They create group identity politics to have a different set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what group you're in. And that lowers the bars of standards and expectations, which insults the work ethic, the ability, and the intelligence of everybody in the group, degrades, disrespects, and then it demonizes, discredited, and delegitimizes an individual who talks against it. It's all meant to be submissive and break your will. That's exactly what it's meant to do. So you break down that chant, okay? Trump, no KKK, no fascist USA, or whatever, something similar to what they say. KKK was created by the Democrats and Margaret Sanger. Okay?
That's why I'm laughing.
Okay, and Margaret Sanger, she didn't create
Queen Witch
KKK,
abortion.
but the Democrats created the KKK, but Margaret Sanger created, what's that, abortion?
Planned Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood, thank you.
Queen Witch who invented abortion.
And she publicly said
abortion.
Yes, she publicly
said. I mean, there was abortion for thousands of years, but she established Planned Parenthood.
Yes, and she
was
literally
Hitler's biggest fan.
Yes, and she literally said publicly, we need to reduce the black population. This is in video, this is in audio, this is in the transcript. And Obama, okay, who is a Democrat, doubled black unemployment. And fascism basically has created only 4 to 6% of people having the primary income of being self-employed. So when you really break down this chant, it just shows how distracted, dumbed down, and divided the populace is.
And they're ignorant.
They don't even know what fascism is. They're basically saying no fascism, and they're being bought and paid for. All these groups are being bought and paid for by NGOs and the George Soroses and the fascist states. It's almost too stupid to talk about. You know?
Yeah, that's right. That's the truth of it. And so people would. If anybody wants to bag me and say what a racist KKK woman I am, I would say that is as far from the truth as what you can get. Okay, my dad, he was the biggest political influence on me in my life. That was Ted Carter. He lived in Rotorua, New Zealand. Prior to that, he lived in Geraldton in Western Australia. You know something? He would go out when he was in Geraldton, and he would actually build windmills and wells on Aboriginal missions, so these Aboriginal kids who were totally fourth world, dirt poor, had clean drinking water. Okay? And one day when my financial position is better than what it is today, I can't go out and build the wells, but I can pay somebody else to, you know. This is not a person who's racist. If I was racist, I'd say, these dang black fellas, they can have their dirty water and dye colour. I don't care. Well, even there, I'm showing, you know, the prejudice that comes because I'm putting on a southern accent. You know, it's so ingrained, you can't get away from it. But it's you know, I care enough about, you know, but these people, I'm sure they have an average IQ of about 80. I think to call them autistic would insult every autistic person out there. And I know a number of autistic people. My teenage son, he's got an IQ of about 140. And he wraps his teachers up in knots because they're all this politically correct, fascist, nutcase educational system that we've got here, you know. And because of what I've told him over the years of giving him a political education, I'm sure his teachers hate him because he you know, he can see all the flaws in their logic, you know, and they say stupid things. What sort of stupid things do they say, son? Race is a big one, he says. He says, my other son had a wallpaper which was a whole lot of black men around Barack Obama, and Barack Obama being a homie with the black guys, okay? And his teacher complained that this was a racist wallpaper on his laptop. And I said, who cares? It's satire. It's funny. And it's totally harmless, okay? And Barack Obama is a traitor to his own people. He absolutely is. You're full on right about him really, really increasing black unemployment. What was that? Yeah, they're really, really nosy. Okay? They want to know everything. And because we have in our family a British blue blood genetic, most British blue bloods are quite tall and quite thin. Okay? And we have a high average IQ. And earlier on this year or late last year, the school teachers tried to accuse me of starving my children. Hello, this is Gwyneth Isaacs here, filling in for Vincent Finelli. I have Rick Sheben on the line, and we were having a conversation about these terrible fascists and the things that they do and how they seem to have no common sense and no political education.
Absolutely. And may I address what you just said before the break?
Yep, that's
okay.
right.
First of all, before I talk about, you mentioned teachers, and your son, I think, mentioned in the background how the number one weapon is race, because I make it very clear that the mainstream media's job is to manufacture perception, pity, guilt, and ideology. But teachers they're basically teaching theory, because most teachers get a job straight out of school. I would like to see teachers have 15 years minimum of successful private sector experience, and I'd sign that bill in a heartbeat. And I'm not saying there aren't good teachers out there, but too many of them are bought and paid for, and they care more about their paycheck and pension, and they need to stand for principle. We need to teach practical experience and not theory from successful private sector teachers. That's what we need. And when your son was talking about race, can you imagine how these elites, these globalists, insult every group out there and basically say in every word, in every way, that your group can't compete. Your group's work is suboptimal. When you do that, you have zero chance of synergy. It's going to be divide and conquer. And what most people, when they say divide and conquer, what they don't say, Gwyneth, is that it lowers the bars of standards and expectations. I don't care if I say this on every show 500 times, okay? Because lowering the bars of standards and expectations needs to be said just as often as the divide and conquer strategy, because they are the same, a different rail on the same track, traveling in the same direction. They're the same thing. And
that's right.
You cannot expect to reward mediocrity with all these participation trophies decade after decade after decade and expect quality of life to go up. And all these politically correct buzzwords like equality, fairness, tolerance, diversity, inclusiveness, prosperity, they're doing the exact opposite. They are basically words that have been used, that have been changed by definition to be used as a weapon against the people. And that's why so many of these late-night shows, even a lot of the mainstream media, they like satire and banter in their television shows, because they can't compete with objective facts and ideas and solutions. And they don't want ideas and solutions. They want people to be under their thumb. And here in America, I don't know what it's like in Australia, but in America, I've mentioned this fact many times on many different shows, Gwyneth, and this is a very sad state to show the despair that we're in. For people in their low 50s and under, the number one cause of death is drug overdose. This is a nation in despair. And we have to talk about ideas and solutions, because we have a new technocracy, a new industrial revolution coming in the form of robotics, automation, and artificial intelligence. And this is going to take millions and millions and millions of jobs, and it's going to continue to lower the quality for the populace, for the people, and increase the profits for the very rich. And that adds to the fascist system. And that's why the elite and the George Soroses and those people have created groups like Antifa, because they're so young and they're so dumb and they don't even know what fascism is. And that's why I talked earlier in the show about how right around 2009, the dictionaries and Googles are literally changing definitions of things like fascism to basically dumb the population down. And we were talking a little... Go ahead.
Yeah, it's like 1984. I said to my boys, listen, have you ever read the book 1984? When I was in high school, it was required reading for 2 or 3 years. In my high school education, each year we would have to read and do a commentary and analysis on 1984 and also Animal Farm. And there were other texts in there as well, because we actually did have a rather socialistic English teacher. This is Gwyneth Isaacs speaking here, filling in for Vincent Finelli for this week. And I have Rick Shealy on air with me. And we were discussing, the text that kids are studying in schools, and about how they don't seem to be studying texts that will actually teach them about politics in the ways that I certainly did when I was in high school, which was only like 25 years ago or something, not that long ago. Now, one son is reading a book called The Hatchet, which is quite a good book. I've actually read it. Teaches a lot about survival skills through this book. A kid has to survive a year alone in the wilderness after his plane crashes. And the other son is reading Macbeth by Shakespeare. And I just let my son know that he'd better pray for God's protection while he's reading that play, because it's actually a cursed play. And why they would, they could be studying any number of Shakespeare plays that would actually teach them a lot about politics. They could be studying Julius Caesar. They could be studying Hamlet. And they could be studying even Romeo and Juliet. Teaches you about how the mafia operates if you do a study on it that way. But no, it has to be Macbeth, about witches and curses. And this is it makes you want to find the nearest brick wall. You know what I mean? What do you think of that, Rick Shealy?
Well, I'll tell you, that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book on the financial, economic, social, and political reasons why we need to be more self-sufficient as the American people, or Australia, or Western world, or just the globe in general. In other words, living below your means, knowing the fine line between needs and wants. But the point to be made here is that we need to talk financial, economic, social, and political rationale equally. And that's what the powers that be do not want to teach. They want you to be cultivated to be a follower. They want to mold your mind and say you're a racist. This is why they race bait, they gender bait, they sex bait, the ideology bait, religion bait. They're even putting generation against generation. This is all to sway public opinion and hold on to the narrative. And what we need to do is, especially here in America, we have a Bill of Rights and a Constitution. And it's pretty obvious that the globalists want to deteriorate this in every way, shape, and form and delegitimize it. And this is why we need to have shows like Vince Finelli showed, USAPrepares.com, and a lot of really good, I hate the term alternative media. I like the term new media because enough people have woken up, and I think Trump's being elected is just an example of that. But people have to realize, whether it be Antifa, Black Lives Matter, even the Islam community, they're all being used, they're being duped by the elite community, by the fascist community, by the globalists. They're being used. And if people would do some reading, some research, and how they're being used, especially like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and when we talked about fascism, and they're even changing the definition post-2009 and totally doing a 180 on it. And people need to realize that we are in the book-burning years of the Western world. And the only way we're going to change things is from the bottom up, and we do it in mass, because it's very difficult for us little people to get a microphone and to share ideas and solutions. And that's why they're holding on everything. Everybody in the White House and in the Pentagon, the whole system is against Trump, because a lot of these people have been bought and paid for, whether they've been caught laundering money, or they've been caught with pedophilia, whatever it is. These people are being protected, and how the elite is changing their minds and making them become conformed is through intimidation, threats, bribery, blackmail, blacklisting, etc. And the little people have to do the reading and research in order to combat all this manipulation and corruption. Gwyneth?
Yep, that's absolutely true. And that's also, in Australia, one of the primary tools that's being used is blackmail levers, okay? And that is being blown wide open in this country, but it's just not being reported. In the dinosaur media, I was going to say mainstream, but it's not. It's lamestream dinosaur media. There's especially a lady by the name of Fiona Barnett, and she was an MK Ultra graduate, okay, and basically apparently got used when she was a child as a child sex slave. She was one of the ones who actually survived, and she grew up and with a great deal of danger to herself is blowing this whole thing wide open, but she's she's an immensely brave lady. If you go to look up her internet site, which is fionabarnett.org, okay, you might not even get it loading properly the first time with Google Chrome. Basically, she blows the whole thing wide open, the whole pedophile cartel. And from my own experience of political people and political families that I've known in Australia, I would say that her assessment is pretty accurate. We also have another media personality here in Australia. His name is Darren Hinch. He was also sexually abused as a child, and he has come out and outed a whole bunch of the pedophiles that have been running this country, including, I think, by memory, back in the day, I think he actually outed George Pell a while back. And, gee, didn't that make him popular? I think he actually lost a television show on Channel 9 because of that. It was either George Pell or it was, one of these mindless, I think Alex Jones calls them Renfields, that he was a Renfield that had quite a lot of political power and influence. These people are crazy, and they happen to run the show, and they're murderers, and they're pedophiles, and what Alex Jones says about them, he's also immensely brave. He's absolutely right. And, it's just absolutely crazy. And the other thing is, this pedophile cartel seems to be particularly after people with blue blood genetics, okay? And what I mean when I say blue blood genetics, I'm talking about people who have an Rh negative blood type. I was talking about this with Richard Alan Miller. We went a bit into the Rh negative thing. It means that you're descended from the giants. And our family absolutely are. They generally became the nobility in every nation where they settled. They have red hair and or blonde hair, and they have blue or green eyes, and they're very, very tall, and they have probably about a 20% greater or 30% greater average intelligence. And it's because of the gene of the giants, okay, that are mentioned in Genesis chapter 6 in the Holy Bible, okay? One of my son's IQs is over 140. The other one had a brain injury at birth, which dropped his IQ points by about 10. He's got an IQ of about 135, okay? And both of them are really, really, really clever kids. And what was that, son? And Connor, one of my sons is 6'3". The other one is 14 years old, and he's one of the tallest kids in his class, and is also going to grow to be over 6 foot tall. He's 5'11". He's 14 years old and 5'11". So that's this is what I'm talking. They're targeting the people like us. The blue bloods, the European blue bloods, the British blue bloods, those with the RH genetics. We are getting hammered with pedophilia. We are getting hammered with race hate, okay? We're not hateful people. We can't help who our ancestors were, but what it's doing to a lot of unaware people with RH genetics who are descended from the giants, it is turning them into a hateful type, okay? And it is going to, if they continue on this way, it is going to reignite a whole race-based civil war. And that very thought terrifies me, because I'm going to get caught up in it one way or another, because I won't shut up. And I know what's actually going on, and I'm sure Rick Shealy, I know that you do as well. And it's us who are the ultimate target of all of this.
Yeah, absolutely, Gwyneth, and this is why we need to stand for principle. And it's so simple. Like when I talked about the practice what you preach laws earlier, if President Trump did this, we can write practice what you preach laws where all these politically correct buzzwords at every level, like racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, extremist, controversial, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hate, all this stuff, we can make it so everybody has the same rule, law, and accountability, and we don't. It's specially tiered for what group you're in. In fact, Dr. Ben Carson came to Northwest Montana years ago, and the first words out of his mouth was, "I hate political correctness." And right after that, he said, when you are politically correct, you turn minorities into victims. So what the elite has done, they've turned the United States of America into the divided groups of America.
This is Gwyneth Isaacs here, filling in for Vincent Finelli. I have Rick Shealy with me, and I would like to just let him talk for this whole last segment of the show, because he's got some really, really important stuff to say. And I want all you fellas to really pay attention to him. So fire away, Rick.
Well, thank you, Gwyneth. First of all, I just want to comment on some of the things that you said during the last segment before the break. When a young person, boy or girl, has trauma, the probability of a normal life, whether it be from especially pedophilia, but most things, is very low. And you mentioned Alex Jones, and I'll tell you something. I think he's a huge patriot, and he's extremely well-read. He has a lot of guts, and that's kind of what we need right now. We need people and all average Joes to stand up, because we need guts right now. I'm not saying we don't need intelligence, a plan of action, things of that nature, but we need guts desperately, because the powers that be, I mean, when they can take a word like fascism and create a group that's bought and paid for, especially their top operatives, and it's just like right-wing extremist groups. You know, a lot of these people these groups have been infiltrated by CIA and other intelligence agencies. And people have to realize that they need chaos. They need infighting for a divide and conquer strategy to work. And as I mentioned earlier, the divide and conquer strategy has everything to do with lowering the bars of standards and expectations. because they have to insult every group out there, work ethic, ability, intelligence, and this is meant to degrade and disrespect every person out there. And you don't empower a nation or a group by lowering the bars of standards and expectations. And this is what we have to realize, because they need to break our will. They need to make us submissive, and that's why they have these politically correct buzzwords like extremist, controversial, racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe, intolerant, violent, hater, with an ism or an ist or a phobia on the back of every word or an anti in front of every word. We are in a deflationary spiral, folks. This is one of the reasons I always go back to Economics 101. This deflationary spiral is turning into a stagflationary complications for the bottom 93%. We are not going to have the ability to control our own destiny when this thing crashes. And I talk about economy on many shows many times. And if just look at interest rates, they're a function of growth, wages, and inflation. They're all heading south. And this is why, when you, like your sons, Gwyneth, you told me some of the things that they're reading. Everybody should be reading Economics 101, because that really shows the true direction and propaganda of the fascist, elitist, globalist arm. Because it's very hard to hide interest rates. And that's why I talk about bonds, and that's why I talk about how they're inversely proportional to yields and the cost of the bonds. And when you look at what the fact that we're in a debt, credit, subsidy bubble,
yep,
the Western world's not going anywhere. And people, every young person needs to read Economics 101, because this way you'll be able to see the mask behind the curtain. Gwyneth?
Yep, that's absolutely true. And they need to learn the difference between Keynes and von Mises in economics. You need to search out those two authors, and you need to study them and compare them. And you know something, it used to be that they divided against the Malthusians and the cornucopians. Okay? It's not that simple. Yes, you can generate your own wealth. What you sow, you will also reap. Okay? If you're lazy and don't do anything, then you're going to suffer. But you know something? We're right at the end of the broadcast.
Yes,
and I feel like I could talk for a whole nother hour on this topic. But unfortunately, it will have to be another day.
It was a pleasure, Gwyneth.
Okay.
Thank you.
As Vincent says, honesty and integrity, the rest is up to you.